Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the death toll rises to at least 94 in the historic Texas flooding. As rescue and recovery efforts continue, the area is bracing for more rain. Amid criticism from Democrats, the White House says the National Weather Service gave out timely warnings, and President Trump is expected to visit the areas hardest hit by the floods later this week. President Trump announcing new tariff rates on a dozen countries, what he's taking issue with, and what the White House tells NTD about certain countries' anti-American policies. Iris Tao reports. The Iran-backed Houthi terrorist group attacks a ship in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Lebanon continue talks over disarming the Hezbollah terrorist group. Jason Perry reports. And in his first trip to Asia as Secretary of State, Marco Rubio is heading to Malaysia tomorrow. Terrorists loom as he's set to meet with several leaders from Southeast Asian countries. Jack Bradley brings us the latest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. At least 94 people are dead following devastating floods through central Texas. Dozens remain unaccounted for. As rescue and recovery efforts continue, the area is dealing with more severe weather. A flood watch covering nearly 5 million people, including all of the flood disaster areas, remains in effect with more scattered showers and storms expected throughout the day. Maribel Gonzalez reports.
Waterways in some of the most devastated parts of central Texas rising again Monday as more rain falls in the area. The elements hampering ongoing search and rescue efforts.
They're running into a lot of technical challenges with terrain, with water.
The Kerr County Sheriff's Office says over 400 local, state, and national first responders and more than a dozen canine units are helping in the search and rescue efforts. Here, the dramatic rescue after two people clung to a tree to save their lives. Others in the state, including children, were forced to swim to safety.
The flood started getting bigger, and it was going up to, we have bunk beds in our cabins, and it was going up to the top bunk, and we had one choice, and we had to swim out of our cabins.
I said a prayer when I was standing on my porch. Both my parents are deceased, and I said, Mom, Dad, God, help.
The death toll continues to rise, including 27 campers and counselors from Camp Mystic along the Guadalupe River.
I've lost near friends, best friends, my boss, my godchildren.
The Hill Country community now questioning if anything could have been done to prevent this tragedy.
Everyone here, if we could have warned them, we would have done so. And we didn't even have a warning.
While survivors come together in their grief.
The outpour of people near, far, it's been incredible.
During the ongoing rescue efforts, a Coast Guard crew is being praised for rescuing 165 people at a girls' camp. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the story.
One man and his crew single-handedly rescued 165 people.
It took us about 4 different attempts to try to make our way into Kerrville. We heard there was about 200 campers there, and they were in need of airlift. There was no other way to get them out. Bridges were gone, roadways were gone, and the water was coming up too high for boat rescue.
The White House praises Ruskin and his team, saying from the U.S. military to first responders and volunteers, these brave Americans remind us who we are. When disaster strikes, they don't run from the storm, they run into it. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem calls Ruskin a hero. This was the first rescue mission of his career, and he was the only triage coordinator at the scene. Scott Ruskin is an American hero. His selfless courage embodies the spirit and mission of the U.S. Coast Guard. Noem also commented on the situation while on Fox News.
I was there on Saturday and spent my time with the governor and the emergency management responders and a lot of the families that have been impacted, some of the parents of those kiddos at Camp Mystic as well. It was absolutely devastating.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt commented on the floods.
Everyone here at the White House, including the President of the United States, is praying for the victims' families and friends during this unimaginable time. The situation on the ground remains dangerous, and there could be additional public safety threats with potential incoming heavy rain. So we encourage everyone in the area to remain vigilant, listen to all warnings, and respond accordingly.
Levitt also defended the Trump administration and the National Weather Service from critics over the floodings.
Blaming President Trump for these floods is a depraved lie, and it serves no purpose during this time of national mourning. The National Weather Service did its job. Despite unprecedented rainfall, the National Weather Service executed timely and precise forecasts and warnings.
At least 27 campers and counselors from Camp Mystic have been confirmed to have died, with 10 still missing. Jason Blair, NTD News.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are set to tackle disaster relief funding for flood-affected areas in Texas and other legislative priorities before the summer recess. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
Family members of at least 2 lawmakers were at Camp Mystic, Texas, where over 24 people died over the weekend's flash floods. The lawmakers' family members were rescued by authorities.
I talked to my colleagues there in Texas, Chip Roy and August Pfluger, whose families, that's Chip's district. August's daughters were at the camp. We also had Betty Carter of Georgia, had grandchildren there. It touches so many families, and all we know to do at this moment is pray. Every available resource has been deployed. The president, of course, is dialed in and watching this develop moment by moment as we are.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson acknowledged that Congress will likely have to approve additional funding to assist in the recovery of affected areas.
But once the declaration is signed, then you have people that are more on the front lines. The FBI was out today helping with some of the work. We've got DNA collection going on to try to identify victims. You've got people that are from all the different agencies, FEMA, obviously, and others. And I got to say, the president has been responsive. He's reached out to me personally. The secretary was here yesterday. I cannot say enough about how quickly people have responded, both at the local level and at the state and federal level, all of those.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle were thankful and acknowledged that a quick response from local, state, and federal authorities saved countless lives.
I mean, the effort is intense. The state has sent incredible resources. The local governments from different places, Austin, San Antonio, many others, have sent first responders, just everything that we possibly can to help. We have to figure out in the future how we make sure that it doesn't happen again.
In Capitol Hill, lawmakers have returned after the long weekend and continue full steam ahead with a slew of legislative items on their agenda.
We have always planned to do the first big reconciliation bill, which is the big, beautiful bill. Now it's done, a huge leap forward for our priorities. But then also we've been planning a second reconciliation bill for the fall that would be attached to the next fiscal year, and then potentially one in the spring. That's my plan. 3 reconciliations bills before this Congress is over.
It's important to note that senators have until July 18th to tackle the House-passed rescissions package that would claw back $9.3 billion in government funding. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Federal officials say a man with a rifle and tactical gear opened fire on law enforcement officers this morning at a Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas. The gunman was shot and killed during an exchange of fire with Border Patrol and local police. One officer was shot and several others injured. The officer who was shot is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation into the incident. In the Middle East, the Iran-backed Houthi terrorist group in Yemen has reportedly attacked a ship in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, Washington and Beirut are taking steps towards disarming the Hezbollah terrorist group in Lebanon. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Just a couple of months ago, the U.S. military ended a bombing campaign against the Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. The two agreed to a ceasefire that said the Houthis would stop targeting U.S. ships. However, the ceasefire did not mention ships from other countries. And on Monday, the Houthis said they attacked a ship in the Red Sea that carried the flag of Liberia. The Houthis said the ship, quote, belongs to a company that violated the blockade by entering ports in occupied Palestine. No injuries or deaths were reported, but there's a risk the vessel could sink. The Iran-backed terrorist group also reported launching more missiles and attacked drones at Israel. No injuries or deaths were reported after that attack as well. Around the same time on Sunday night, Israeli forces said they sent about 20 fighter jets to Yemen that struck multiple targets belonging to the Houthis, including 3 ports and a power plant. Israel also reported striking this ship, which was stolen by the Houthis. It had a radar system that could detect international shipping vessels and help conduct terrorist activity. Meanwhile, U.S. envoy Tom Barrack was in Lebanon on Monday, where he met with Lebanese officials. Barrack said he was satisfied with Lebanon's response to a proposal on how to disarm the Hezbollah terrorist group in their country.
What we're doing is saying, you want change, you change it, and we'll be there to support you. If you don't want change, it's no problem. The rest of the region is moving at Mach speed, and you will be left behind.
And he added this about the situation with Israel.
My honest feeling is the Israelis do not want war with Lebanon. They're not parasitic. They have no desire to take over Lebanon.
Israel currently has forces stationed in southern Lebanon, saying they're there to help defend Israel from the Hezbollah terrorist group. And Hezbollah has said that Israeli forces must withdraw from southern Lebanon before they will give up their weapons. Meanwhile, Lebanon's prime minister says the Lebanese government wants to reclaim the authority to make decisions on war and peace. And in another development, the White House said U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff is set to travel to Qatar later this week. And he's expected to continue talks on a possible ceasefire deal with the Hamas terrorist group over the war in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Former Russian Transport Minister Roman Starvoit died by suicide today, just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin fired him from the job. That's according to Russian officials. His deputy was appointed acting minister. Russia's investigative committee said Starvoit was found in his car with a gunshot wound. He served as governor of Russia's Kursk region before being appointed transportation minister last year. Russian media have reported that his dismissal may have been the result of an embezzlement investigation. Allegations of embezzlement stem from the collapse of Russia's defensive lines in Kursk after a Ukrainian incursion in August 2024. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is meeting with leaders of Southeast Asian countries and Malaysia this week. That says President Trump imposes new tariffs on several of these countries that could force new trade deals. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
Marco Rubio is meeting with his counterparts from the 10 member countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, and that'll be in Malaysia this week. It's his first trip to Asia as Secretary of State. Going into this, President Trump on Monday announced new tariffs that target some of these countries, like Malaysia hit with a 25% tariff, Myanmar and Laos 40% tariffs, Thailand, Cambodia 36%, Indonesia 32%. Trump says that any retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. from now on will be reciprocated on top of this. All of this is set to take effect next month. One key element of all of these has to do with transshipments. That means goods sourced in one country, putting goods on ships in another country to ship to the U.S. to avoid paying those higher tariffs. All of Trump's new tariffs come with the orders that transshipments will be subject to tariffs from the original source country. Vietnam signed a trade deal last week with the U.S. In that deal, U.S. goods will enter the Vietnamese market tariff-free, while Vietnamese goods shipped to the U.S. will be subject to a 20% tariff. Any transshipments, like from China, Vietnam's largest import partner, then go through Vietnam and then bound for the U.S., they're slapped with a 40% tariff, albeit that's less than the over 50% tariffs that the U.S. currently has on China. This trip to Malaysia also comes as the Chinese Communist Party is becoming increasingly aggressive in the region. The State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said in a statement on Monday, in his first trip to Asia as Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio is focused on reaffirming the United States' commitment to advancing a free, open, and secure Indo-Pacific region. A free and open Indo-Pacific are the same terms that Rubio used when he met last week in Washington with the foreign ministers of Japan, India, and Australia, the Quad Alliance. That's amid China's military increasing its drills and aggression and violating other nations' airspace and waterways in doing so. Now, they also focused on increasing access to critical minerals in their own countries and work around China as a source of the main supply. Now, that's because they're concerned about vulnerabilities of relying on the CCP, an adversary, for a product that goes into many things from electronics to medical devices and even military equipment. So now we may see similar goals here in the ASEAN countries. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Coming up, the Department of Government Efficiency says it saved Americans over $800 million after federal agencies canceled 54 contracts in just 2 days. We'll bring you the details on where those cuts were made. The Department of Homeland Security says it will terminate deportation protections for thousands of Hondurans and Nicaraguans. The move will affect approximately 76,000 people. And 7 bodies have been recovered after a deadly fireworks explosion in Northern California. Officials share new details on the progress of the investigation. Christina Corona brings us the latest after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump cranking up the pressure on trading partners by informing a dozen of them of new tariff rates today. The White House tells NTD that the president will take any action to prevent countries from taking advantage of the U.S. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
And President Trump on Monday sent 12 letters to different countries threatening them with new tariff rates if they don't strike a trade deal with the U.S. by August 1st. That includes 25% on Malaysia, 30% on South Africa, and 36% on Cambodia. South Korea and Japan are also hit with a new 25% tariff. The White House says the president continues to seek tailor-made trade deals with each country.
I told all of you that the president was going to create tailor-made trade plans for each and every country on this planet, and that's what this administration continues to be focused on. Or these new rates that will be provided in this correspondence to these foreign leaders will be going out the door within the next month, or deals will be made, and those countries continue to negotiate with the United States.
At the same time, Trump is also taking some of the edge off with a new executive order on Monday to extend the date for all reciprocal tariffs to August 1st. And shortly after President Trump informed South Korea of the new tariff rate, the South Korean government is now getting back, saying that it's now going to step up negotiations with the U.S. The White House says Trump's tariff policies have been working in getting the U.S. new trade deals.
The fact that he has announced a framework with China, a trade deal with the United Kingdom, a trade deal with Vietnam, and many others to come in just a matter of 6 months is truly historic, and it's a testament to this president and his trade team who are working around the clock to get this done.
On Sunday, President Trump announced that any countries aligning themselves with the, quote, anti-American policies of BRICS will be subject to an additional 10% in tariff. The BRICS alliance, which includes China, Russia, and South Africa, has repeatedly called for an end of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. The White House tells me that the president is trying to stop these countries from taking advantage of the U.S.
Well, the president feels, generally speaking, that BRICS is seeking to undermine the interests of the United States. It's the president's utmost responsibility to put the interests of the United States first. He'll take any action necessary to prevent countries from taking advantage of the United States and our people.
And in other news, on Monday night, the president is having dinner with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The Department of Government Efficiency said it saved Americans $804 million after federal agencies canceled 54 contracts in just 2 days. Those included contracts under the now defunct U.S. Agency for International Development. Here's more.
The Trump administration's push to cut waste, fraud, and abuse makes a new milestone. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, recently announced that federal contracts worth $1.8 billion were canceled. In a social media post on Friday, DOGE announced that 54 government contracts had been terminated in just 2 days. This includes contracts with the former U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. It states an $842,000 U.S. aid professional services contract for a director of the Armenia Innovation Hub within the U.S. Aid Armenia Economic Growth Office and a $33,000 U.S. AGM contract for 24/7 FM broadcast services to the Togolese Republic. The announcement comes less than 10 days after the Senate Appropriations Committee debated over President Trump's proposed billions of dollars of cuts to USAID and other sectors of government. Senator Jeff Merkley blasted Russell Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, for approving the termination of several U.S. aid programs, arguing that it put life-saving care at risk.
For you to come before this body and say that this vast shutdown of 82% of what USAID had no impact on human life just shows that you chose to make decisions totally out of sync with the Constitution.
Senator Katie Britt countered with examples of contracts that Vault was seeking to eliminate.
$5.1 million to strengthen the, quote, resiliency of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer global movements. $833,000 for services for transgender people, sex workers, and their clients for sexual networks in Nepal.
3 days before Doge's announcement, on July 1st, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the end of U.S. aid. In a blog post on the State Department's website, Rubio said this era of government-sanctioned inefficiency has officially come to an end. On Sunday, Doge posted another announcement. It applauded Vaught's office for cutting its annual spend on federal contracts by 50%, from $484 million to $242 million, while improving both the quality and scope of its services.
The Department of Homeland Security says it will terminate deportation protections for thousands of Hondurans and Nicaraguans. Effective on September 6th, the action will end temporary protected status for an estimated 76,000 people. The Trump administration has already moved to end legal status for 348,000 Venezuelans and 521,000 Haitians. A number of immigrants from Afghanistan and Cameroon have had their status revoked as well. Temporary protected status protects immigrants from being deported and allows them to work. The Trump administration has argued that deportation protections have previously been over-applied. The White House also claims that many immigrants no longer qualify for protections. Democrats warn that those deported could be forced to return to dangerous home countries. An attorney for the Justice Department says the Trump administration wants to deport illegal immigrant Kilmer Abrego Garcia as soon as possible. Abrego Garcia is currently in custody awaiting trial. DOJ Attorney Jonathan Gwynn says there's no intention to just put him in limbo in ICE custody while we wait for the criminal case to unfold. The attorney added that Abrego Garcia will be removed, as would any other illegal alien in that process. The immigrant was previously deported to his home country of El Salvador. Multiple Democratic lawmakers called for his return. The Trump administration then brought Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. so he could face criminal charges. He's accused of smuggling illegal immigrants from the border to the interior of the country. Authorities in Northern California provided an update on the investigation into last week's deadly fireworks warehouse explosion in Yolo County, where the bodies of all 7 missing workers were found. NTD's Christina Corona has more details on the story.
Yolo County officials confirmed at a press conference Monday that all 7 missing workers' remains have been found after the deadly fireworks warehouse explosion in Esparto on July 1st. The remains were recovered over the weekend at the blast site.
As far as the 7 deceased, the DNA process will start shortly in order to obtain official identification. We expect to have that in the next 48 hours. And following the notification of next of kin, we will make that information available.
Investigators from the state fire marshal and federal agencies spent Saturday clearing hazards. Esparto Fire Department Chief Curtis Lawrence said recovery efforts are mostly complete, but crews are still working to clear undetonated explosives.
Throughout the last 2 days, we've been gathering those types of devices and conducting burn-off operations, as we're calling them, to immediately remediate those hazards and issues right here in the area.
The warehouse, owned by Devastating Pyrotechnics, was not permitted to store fireworks. A county official confirmed the property is owned by Yolo County Sheriff's Lieutenant Sam Machado. His home was destroyed in the explosion, but it's unclear whether he was injured. Records also show an Esparto volunteer firefighter is also linked to a fireworks business registered at the same address as the facility. Lawrence says the volunteer firefighter is currently on a leave of absence. Fire officials say they had visited the site before.
Again, we have done site visits before, so yes, we knew that there was a facility here.
According to the Esparto Fire Protection District, the explosions ignited several structures on the property, sparking multiple grass fires that burned roughly 80 acres, which has now been fully contained. Officials said the investigation is slowly shifting into a law enforcement matter, with more information expected to be released at a later time. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, President Trump is hosting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House for the third time this evening. Former career diplomat Bart Marcois joins us to discuss what to expect from this meeting. And Britain commemorates the victims of the July 7th bombing in London 20 years ago. A horrific terrorist attack that killed 52 people and injured hundreds more. Police highlight the changes that make Britain more secure since that tragic day. Welcome, Hudson reports from London after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As President Trump is pursuing a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, are everyday Americans feeling confident about how he's handling the situation? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
How do you think President Trump has been handling the situation in the Middle East, especially between Israel and Hamas right now?
I think he's handling it great. He's doing exactly what he should be doing, trying to get them to quit shooting each other. That's the main deal, is to try to stop it any way you can.
Palestinians and the Israelis both need to live peacefully. Hamas just has to stop, and I wish they would return the rest of the hostages.
He's been handling it boldly, showing leadership, and pushing things to get things actually done. Nothing's been done in the past.
I think he's trying to offer options for people and different nations on how things can be settled. Hopefully everything can be worked out.
I would say he's done better than everybody else before him, but it's not going to be over till it's over. Is that what Yogi Berra said?
Recently, there was a peace deal between Israel and Iran just recently. And are you confident that a similar trajectory will happen to Israel and Hamas as well?
Frankly, I'm not quite as optimistic, but I hope it does. I think it would be best for everybody in that region if they were to work out a deal somehow.
Depending on your definition of peace, will they quit fighting? Maybe. Will there be peace? No. It's kind of like having a neighbor 2 doors down or next door, and every time you walk out your house, they throw rocks at you.
I believe they will come to a ceasefire. I don't know if it's proposed by him or someone else. They will come to a ceasefire. They've got to.
And if Iran's been involved, hopefully what President Trump did will prevent them to get their nuclear weapons, and maybe the people of Iran will finally be able to have their country back.
Well, I'm hoping that the Israel and Iran ceasefire will continue, and we also hope that Israel and Hamas can sort things out and the hostages can be freed. President Trump is going to be the best person available to get that done.
President Trump is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House tonight. Meanwhile, the BRICS summit wrapped up in Brazil today. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is Bart Marcois. He's a former career diplomat and Energy Department official. Bart, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, this will be the Prime Minister's third meeting at the White House under Trump 2.0. What are your main expectations of this meeting?
Well, I think obviously they're going to talk about the ceasefire and the terms of the ceasefire and the shape of any peace deal, which is a totally different animal from a ceasefire. And they're going to talk about new potential partners in the Abraham Accords. There are lots of tantalizing rumors coming out of the Middle East about various countries and entities being ready to sign on to the Abraham Accords. That we're hearing that Syria is willing to sign on and that they're willing to give up the Golan Heights to Israel as part of the deal. I heard this morning a report that there is a tribal entity calling themselves the Emirate of Hebron in the ancient city of Hebron, who say we are not represented by the PLO, by the Palestinian Authority, and we would like to make peace with Israel and join the Abraham Accords as the Emirate of Hebron. There are more countries like that looking to join a permanent peace and normalization. And I think a lot of that is going to be on the table tonight.
A lot of developments for sure. Now, Iran's nuclear program and a lasting ceasefire on the Gaza Strip have been dominating the headlines ahead of this visit. In terms of the ceasefire, though, digging into that a bit, how likely are we to see that announced during this visit?
I'm not sure it's going to be announced. I find some of the conditions that are that are some of the terms that are being offered absolutely appalling. And I know the Israelis do. I think that President Trump does. I think they're out there because they know that Hamas will still reject it. I'll be surprised if Hamas accepts it. But to say, oh, we will let the UN provide food aid. Well, the UN was providing food aid before, and that meant that they took it from international partners and they gave it to Hamas to distribute. And Hamas used it as a weapon, used food as a weapon to control the population. Now you have a humanitarian fund out there distributing food aid, and Hamas is shooting people that come close to the distribution centers. They also are making the reprehensible term of allowing Hamas to continue to hold hostages, and they're holding dead bodies as hostages. You know, Jewish tradition respects the human body. They consider it, but they call it B'Tselem Elohim, the image of God, and they respect every piece of every human body. There's a group called Zaka that is it means I can't remember the exact meaning. That volunteers for disaster victims, and they go and they literally scour sites of explosions and pick up every last piece of every human body and try to piece it together so that it can be buried. That's how much respect they have for dead human bodies, and Hamas knows that, and they're holding dead bodies as hostages. They're holding at least 20 live hostages. Let them release all of the hostages and then talk about a ceasefire and then talk about peace. And I know that's the Israeli position. I'm sure that President Trump will not approve any kind of peace deal that still holds at least American hostages. And there are still American hostages being held. It's just not going to happen. It shouldn't happen while those hostages are still being held.
I have spoken with people of the Zaka group before. They also help other, natural disaster and war-torn areas like Ukraine. A very incredible group. I want to go back to your earlier point. What would a post-war Gaza look like? Because Netanyahu has said Hamas cannot be allowed to regroup and potentially launch another October 7th, while Hamas's charter says it's in direct conflict with Israel. Is a lasting ceasefire even possible given those stances?
Not given those stances, no. And I don't see the Israelis changing theirs. They have no incentive to. They have Hamas on the run. Hamas itself is saying, look, 80% of our people are gone. Our leadership, our fighters, we can't really mobilize anymore. But Hamas has to completely disband. They have to give up the hostages. They have to give up the remaining leadership. And then they have to change their charter. They have to eliminate the provisions in the charter that call for the death of not just Israelis, but of every Jew in the world. And then after that, all the Christians and all the non-Christian, non-monotheists and they expect that the entire world will submit to their interpretation of Islam. They can't go on like that. They can't continue having United Nations schools teaching children to murder Jews and teaching them to hate Jews and to hate Israelis. Those kind of things have to be changed before there can be a lasting peace.
And Bart, zooming out a bit here, if we do see this lasting ceasefire or perhaps an expansion to the Abraham Accords, what's the likely impact on China, which has been angling to be seen as a mediator in the Middle East?
Great question, Tiffany. All of this, everything that's happened in the last month or two has been one body blow after another to the reputation of China. China has been exposed as an unreliable ally. They stood by and they did nothing to help their so-called ally, Iran, their client, Iran. They have done nothing to help them. They've done nothing to support them. They will do nothing to support them except send clandestine plane loads of equipment and supplies to them. They are increasingly irrelevant in the region because people don't see them as a strong horse. We can't write them off. It's a huge country. It's a powerful country, but they are not relevant in the Middle East right now.
And speaking of China, the BRICS summit just took place in Brazil. That's the bloc made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, both Xi Jinping and Putin were missing this time. Trump actually announcing an extra 10% tariffs on any country aligning themselves with BRICS and their, quote, anti-American policies. How much of an impact or a burden would that be on these nations?
It is a deterrent. It's a signal to them that if they go forward with part of that anti-American policy program that has been suggested by some BRICS members, that they will pay a price for it. Our real vulnerability as America is the level of debt that we have, and if the world turned away from the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, that would deal us a blow that would be very difficult to recover from. President Trump is aware of that, and he's signaling that if they even look at doing that, he'll slap 10% tariffs on them, 10% extra. And he said before he was inaugurated, he said anybody who really goes forward and tries to carry that out will get the full wrath of the weight of the American economic power. And had Joe Biden still been president, had Kamala Harris been elected president, I would be terrified of this BRICS meeting. But with Donald Trump in office and with the commitment, you see a commitment from Mike Johnson that there will be 2 more reconciliation packages passed, and they will focus on cutting spending. If we truly rein in our spending, we will cover over our Achilles heel, and they will not be able to hurt us. The American economic growth is all that's protecting us from paying the price for our debt. China, again, increasingly irrelevant. When Xi Jinping doesn't even bother to show up, it's a sign that he's weak at home. His grip is failing. His grip is loosening, and he doesn't dare leave home during this time.
Speaking of Xi Jinping, this is the first time he's missed the BRICS summit since he took power in 2013. Do you see his absence having a notable impact on the dynamic among just the BRICS nations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this started as an effort. Really, it was Brazil and India that started this, and it was the triumph of the non-aligned movement that started back in the 1960s. And it was an attempt to stabilize the world economy amongst non-aligned countries, meaning the previously third world countries, some of which are very, very wealthy now and are increasing in wealth. And the idea was that the southern hemispheric countries should unite and combine their economic power, their population power. China and Russia sort of muscled their way in, and they started calling it BRICS. And China has been kind of in the driver's seat for the last couple of years. And with Xi not even showing up, it's now Narendra Modi's, Prime Minister Modi's show. And I think this is a time for the primacy of India. And India, it's in India's interest to come closer to the United States. It's in Prime Minister Modi's interest, and it accords with his personal and political desire to be closer to President Trump and to America. So I think that the dynamic is shifting with this meeting. It just shifted from China to India as the leader, and I think it's India's ball to carry for a while.
Well, big changes for sure. Bart Marquez, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's always a pleasure.
Britain marks the 20th anniversary of the July 7th bombings. The terrorist attack killed 52 people and injured several hundred more. A memorial ceremony commemorates the victims. Police highlight the changes that made Britain more secure in the wake of that tragic day. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more on the story.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and London Mayor Sadiq Khan lay wreaths to mark the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 London bombings. the deadliest attack on the British capital since World War II. A monument in Hyde Park of 52 steel columns commemorates the 52 people who were killed. They join bereaved families and survivors at St. Paul's Cathedral. 52,000 white petals fluttered down from the cathedral's dome as two survivors read out the 52 names of those killed. The father of a victim spoke.
When 4 bombs exploded on the 7th of July 2005, lives were destroyed and the flame of hope faltered for what seemed like an eternal moment. For many people, nothing was the same again. And yet everything was the same again, because the good which is in Londoners and the countless visitors who they host at any given moment is not erased by hatred or by threat, or rather is fostered to produce a harvest of hope for each generation.
4 men inspired by Al-Qaeda blew themselves up on 3 subway trains and a bus during the morning rush hour on July 7, 2005, killing 52 and wounding more than 770. They were the first suicide bombings on European soil. The 4 bombers were all Islamists. 3 were British-born sons of Pakistani immigrants, while the 4th was a convert born in Jamaica. London Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley said the national approach to counter-terrorism has made 2 major changes since the attack.
The first was the changes that brought policing and our security services, particularly MI5, much more close together so that we now have the closest joint operating arrangements anywhere in the world. And secondly, counter-terrorism work became something that wasn't just about what was based in London. And a network was built with bases in all of the regions across the country.
He said that national partnership has created something stronger and far more effective at protecting communities. Mayor Sadiq Khan said it's a day of remembrance, but highlighted that threat remains.
I know from speaking to the police, security experts and others, that the threat level on our city and our country is still substantial. That means an attack is unlikely.
A recent study revealed that terrorists in British prisons are teaching organised criminals how to make bombs. In return, the criminals teach the extremists how to launder money and use the dark web to buy weapons which could be used in terror attacks. British security service MI5 last year said that British authorities have stopped 43 late-stage attack plots since 2017. They said 75% are Islamist extremist, while 25 are far-right extremist. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said the government would relentlessly confront and counter threats to the UK's national security. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Coming up in Wimbledon, Novak Djokovic was one of a number of favorites in action today. We'll have the latest on how he fared after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. 24-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic was in action today at the All England Club, looking to continue his quest for a record-tying 8th Wimbledon title. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Novak Djokovic overcame an unusually slow start today, losing the first set to Alex de Minaur, only to roar back and win the final 3 sets to advance to the quarterfinals. The 38-year-old lost 5 of his first 7 service games, but eventually got the win, taking the final 5 games of the 4th set to close it out.
It was a big challenge and honestly big relief to finish the match, in 4 sets. The way the 4th started, it was much closer to getting into 5th than finishing it off, to be honest. But I went into kind of full lock-in mode. I think the last 3 games I dropped only 1 point, and I finally was able to kind of do what I wanted to do and swing through the ball. But it was very challenging, honestly. Credit to him for making me feel very uncomfortable on the court, and just fortunate to get through this one.
The 7-time Wimbledon champion will next face 22nd seeded Flavio Cobolli in the quarterfinals. The 23-year-old Cobolli downed former U.S. Open champion Marin Cilic in 4 sets today to advance. Elsewhere at the All England Club, 10th-seeded American Ben Shelton continued his run there with a 4-set victory. And on the women's side, 18-year-old Mira Andreeva topped American Emma Navarro 6-2, 6-3 in a battle of top 10 players. Meanwhile, in soccer yesterday, the U.S. lost to Mexico in the Gold Cup final 2-1 despite an early lead. The Americans were notably absent a number of their top players for various reasons, including top player Christian Pulisic. U.S. head coach Mauricio Pochettino refused to blame his less-than-ideal roster afterwards.
No, now we are not going to complain. I think this roster that we build is a roster that deserves to be here, and I think now is not the point to talk about the player that should be here or not should be here, or maybe in the future, yes or not. I think we wanted to win. We are talking about the competition. We are talking about the performance. We are talking about that we lose the final. We are disappointed. That I think is not a moment to talk about, if should be one or another name in the roster. I think all is going to be about the performance in the future.
The U.S. has 8 friendlies remaining to tune up for the World Cup next summer, including 6 this fall. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
Hot dogs are an American staple, especially at baseball games, parades, and 4th of July cookouts. We're curious to find out what Americans thought about a famous hot dog brand owned by a Chinese company. NTD's David Lamb has more.
The 4th of July weekend just passed, and many Americans enjoyed a U.S. staple, the hot dog. One of America's renowned hot dog brands, Nathan's Famous, is owned by Smithfield, which is owned by WH Group, a Chinese company based in Hong Kong. According to its website, it's the world's largest pork producer. People in California gave NTD their reactions.
That is shocking to me. I don't eat hot dogs, but I know about Nathan's. I don't know. I've never heard that. That's crazy.
Economic activity should go, I think, fairly unfettered. There's some companies that are maybe strategic to certain industries that might be tough, but otherwise, I think let the market do what the market does.
I think it depends on the country, I guess, is if it's going to be like a violent country or something like that, or something that I am already boycotting. It's I'm just going to change how I view the company, I guess.
Depends on their governance, on what safety rules they follow and what procedures they have in place. As long as they have FDA oversight, I think the ownership, again, it's an economic issue.
WH Group acquired Smithfield in 2013 and is an investment holding company. It produces and sells packaged meats and pork in China, North America, and Europe. David Lamb, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.